welcome to the October 23rd City Council Work Session. My name is Randy Groves. I'm the Council President, and I'm standing in tonight for Mayor Lucy Venus. Thank you for joining us in this hybrid meeting format. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for the meeting on the public webcasts and meeting materials webpage. Thank you again for joining us. I call the October 23rd, 2023 work session of the Eugene City Council to order. City Manager, first item, would you like to take it away?
Sir.
Oh, excuse me.
I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda that I would like us to flip the order of the work session and begin with the work session on neighborhood planning.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of flipping the order on the work session, please raise their hands and say aye.
All right.
Looks like it passes.
All right.
I didn't see if did you get the vote?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Unanimous, was it not?
Yes, it was unanimous. Well, I didn't see the people on the screen there.
Yeah, they raised
Two.
their hand.
Okay, great.
All right, you okay if I say a couple of intro comments while they get ready?
Sure.
Awesome. So with the flip of the agenda, we're going to start with neighborhood planning. And I just wanted to provide a little bit of context and reminder that we were here earlier this year talking about the Planning and Development Department's work plan, in part to talk about all the things that were out there that we were trying to staff to include neighborhood planning. As you recall, there was a lot of things on that list. There's a lot of things that are being required now by the state. And we've been through a number of resource limitations through budgets, et cetera. And so we're here tonight to present, I think, a slightly different format and framework, because when we had that work session, we thought there was going to be some discussion about should we do this neighborhood first or that neighborhood first. And I think what we heard from you was, it'd be really great if we could actually try to do both at the same time, which is a pretty big ask if we don't do it in a little slightly different way. So Alyssa and Fabio are here tonight to kick off that presentation and discussion about kind of where we're heading and to get your feedback.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for having us come at 5:30. I'm glad we were here. Good evening, Council. My name is Alyssa Hanson. I'm the city's planning director, and I'm joined today with Fabio Andrade, who is the manager of the city's Office of Equity and Community Engagement. And as Sarah mentioned, today's work session is a follow-up to one held earlier this year, which was kind of two topics. One was the Planning and Development Department's work plan, and Denny Bro and I walked you through that. And then second was a discussion about potentially reordering the neighborhood planning work. And at that meeting, the majority of councilors expressed a desire to move forward with neighborhood planning efforts for both the university and the Bethel areas simultaneously. So today, Fabio and I are here to give you an update on the work that's happened since then. I'm going to provide you some background and context on neighborhood planning. Fabio is going to share the approach that we're proposing to pilot to work with both neighborhoods on this. And then finally, we're going to get some feedback from you, hopefully, and before we get this launched. Let's see. So here I am starting with the background. Okay. As you, I think, well know, the city has a long history of working with community members to create and adopt land use plans that address conditions and issues unique to specific areas. Historically, these have been efforts that have been led by the planning division, and they have resulted in adopted land use plans, like land use policy documents. The current effort is happening and has been happening in the River Road, Santa Clara neighborhoods. This effort started in 2017 and is anticipated to wrap up in 2024. And I think, as we all know, next in the queue are the university and Bethel areas. And what I want to spend a little bit more time on is what I'm calling evolving landscape. But as we kind of highlighted in April, in the last several years, there have been some significant changes that create the need for us to look at a new approach to neighborhood planning. And I'm going to cover those three factors right now. So first is new state legislation. So this is really the biggest factor, and we call it, an evolving legal landscape that emphasizes a citywide focus to planning. So here's some recent changes in state law that have really required us to approach our planning and our work plan differently. And this is, allowing for accessory dwellings, middle housing, updating clear and objective and needed housing provisions, the parking reform code amendments, and also there is a whole host of previous and ongoing work on housing planning and production at the state level. So as a result of these, we're really, our work plan has gotten a lot fuller. And two, we're really focused on citywide efforts. And then these also, in a sense, can limit how certain issues are addressed. And I can give you one example it's in the AIS as well, but in River Road, Santa Clara, during some of their visioning, they had talked about where exactly they wanted to have middle housing. They also talked about potentially requiring more parking along the corridor through state law. We were not, they're not able to accomplish either of those specific changes. The next major factor is that, and this is actually a really, really positive thing, is that we now have Eugene specific plans. We have the Envision Eugene Comprehensive Plan and the Eugene 2035 Transportation System Plan, both which were adopted in 2017. And this gives us an opportunity to actually have local policies that previously did not exist. So previously we've relied on the Metro Plan and a regional transportation system plan. So our policies are kind of at a regional scale, or have been. And then we also had neighborhood plans. Now we have that opportunity to have localized policies, and that didn't exist before. And then finally, I don't think I have to spend too much time on this one, but resource constraints are also an issue, not just in terms of there's a lot of work on our plates, but as you've been having meetings also about, it's just, there's citywide conversations about revenue and finances, and those have an impact on this work as well. So before I hand it over to Fabio, I want to talk a little bit about that. Given these factors, what we did is pull together a staff team to talk about, how can we do a new approach, and what does that look like? How can we move forward with both neighborhoods and pilot something in those? And so when I talk about approach, the one thing I do want to say, it's more than just process, it's also outcome. And I think some people might think of approach being the process, but in this case, it's really also looking at a different outcome. And we don't anticipate the outcome of these to be adopted land use plans. Rather, they're going to be more action oriented. They're going to be looking at benefits and amenities that those areas, are prioritizing. And I will just end with, I think there's really a lot to be excited about in what Fabio is going to present to you. And so I will hand it over to him.
Good evening, councilors. Fabio Andrade with the Office of Equity and Community Engagement. And based on what we just heard from Alyssa, we do need a new approach for neighborhood planning. If we want to produce plans that are actionable and that considers the current context in terms of legal requirements and the resources we have available. We also need to make sure that whatever we produce in terms of neighborhood planning is aligned with the city's general direction and our strategic plan. So from the current plan, we have identified some goals and actions that can be addressed through neighborhood planning. For example, under urgent community needs, we can address issues of housing affordability. We can work to promote an increased sense of safety, and we can support the business community to promote economic development. Under culture of belonging, we can use the neighborhood planning process to achieve a stronger relationship with the community. Neighborhood plans tend to bring more people to the conversation, And we hope to expand that as we embark in this new approach to community planning. Under communication and outreach, we can also use this process and take advantage of it to promote better and increase awareness of the most pressing topics the city has been working on and things that the community has a strong interest in. In addition to the goals we have identified from the strategic plan, we can also use this process to promote better community engagement overall. We can adopt a new planning methodology that has clear and very objective processes that is easier for the community to understand. And we can use it to increase capacity of residents to get together and address issues per their own initiative. For example, increasing the capacity of neighborhood associations, promoting more diverse participation in those groups, for example. The approach we are proposing is comprehensive. We want to make sure that we have staff from all city departments. So OECE, the Office of Equity and Community Engagement, would be the coordinating unit. But we are going to have staff from all departments participating, and we'll be getting technical advice from all of them. We also hope to get strong participation from residents and neighborhood associations. We want to partner with the school districts, nonprofits, the business community, and throughout the process, we want to identify new stakeholders, groups that we can bring into the conversation and make it inclusive of their participation and interests. Let me walk you through a visual representation of what this new approach would look like. So let's take the Bethel area, for example. Any neighborhood planning process starts with us listening to the community. We want to understand what is their vision, what are the needs and priorities for the community. Then we want to take that information and examine everything the city has produced, existing plans and current processes. We can then take that information back to the community and have a conversation. How are we addressing your needs in the existing plans and in the current planning processes? We may find that many needs are being already addressed, but some are not. So that information comes back as feedback that we can use to update the plans. The resulting process would be a neighborhood plan that is a conversation between what the community needs and what we are doing. So this has some additional benefits for the community. We can help people understand the processes better. Sorry, my advance by accident. We can help people understand the process a little bit better. We can make it easier for residents to see how the needs are being addressed. And we can produce neighborhood plans that are connected to everything else that the city is doing. And this is the proposal for how to get there. So some actions can be started right away. Our office can start creating an interdepartmental team, stakeholder mapping, promoting announcements to the community, and researching best practices. By spring of 2024, we can increase community outreach, start a process design, vision exercises, needs assessment, and present a progress report to council and check on which resources we need to finish the process. By summer of 2024, we can engage in idea generation, action planning, and prioritization. We can also work on tools for implementing the plan. This is not a final process. As we said, it's just an approach. We hope to get there through community engagement, so everything may change as we go along, but this is the general direction, and we hope that people can see, or residents in those areas can see that we're planning with instead of planning for them. And with that, we'll be happy to take your questions and comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there counselors with questions? Councilor Evans.
Yeah, appreciate the presentation. So given our resource constraints, what are we looking at in terms of the scope of work? Are we, I'm not expecting, a full-blown process similar to River Road in Santa Clara, but as you've outlined in the slide presentation, this is going to be a fairly truncated process to begin with. And then after summer of 2024, are we looking to develop another timeline? What does the horizon look like for this process? I mean, are we narrowing scope? Are we looking, are we trying to do everything from soup to nuts in this?
Based on our proposal, we still hope to do everything that is needed for people to really understand the issues we have to address in the neighborhood and to come up with an action plan or request for updates in the comprehensive plan that meets the needs of the neighborhood. The difference is that because we're not doing land use planning, the processes can be simplified. And we are trying to leverage all resources we have at our disposal. So we have some capacity building funds. We have some staff capacity that we are pulling from different departments. And our office will take the lead in coordinating with associations, residents, and other stakeholders, which is something we already do through the Neighborhood Association program. So we just redirect some of the work we do in our office to have more capacity to support the process.
Is that it, Councilor Evans?
Yeah, that's it for now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Zelenka, followed by Councilor Leach.
Thanks. Full-blown neighborhood comprehensive land use plans are very problematic. They're very difficult to do. We haven't done one in 15, 20 years. They take too long. They're not nimble. State laws or things intervene to change it in the middle of doing it. They're really expensive, and they ask a lot of stakeholders or neighbors. The River Road Santa Clara, we're over 5 years on it. And not sure we'll ever do a comprehensive land use neighborhood plan again. What we really need is a solution-oriented process that's nimble, that identifies the issues or needs that are specific to a neighborhood, then focuses on solutions. And not necessarily that it's always about land use. In fact, most of the time it's not about land use, and don't need to do land use changes to solve the issues or the problems that we see in neighborhoods. So and the neighborhood issues or problems are unique a lot of the times. They're not everywhere in the city, which will require neighborhood specific solutions that cut across city departments and work and have people work together to come to solutions. Greg and I worked with Alyssa and Danny to sketch this out one afternoon, and I think this process that first identifies the issue, needs, or problems in a neighborhood, then engages a project team that cuts across different departments to help work on it, so that when people say, oh, we have to talk about parking, well, planning can't talk about parking because that's in a different place, or can't talk about development standards because that's in a different place than planning. Or so all these different parts of the city coming together in a project team really makes a lot of sense. So you can get a holistic view and holistic solutions and strategies. So then once we've identified the project team and the issues or problems, then we can look at the tools, the strategies, and the actions that address the specific problems in that neighborhood. And we can do ordinance changes and rules, or create new rules and ordinances. I think this process is going to be cheaper, faster, and better with regard to the results. And I'm really excited about this new approach and piloting it in the university area and the Bethel neighborhoods. I think we're going to see better results faster with a lot less angst and a lot less investment on people's time and investment by the city planning staff, which is very constrained. So I like where we're heading a lot.
Thank you, Councilor Zelenka. Councilor Leach.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the process as well. My question is that I see a lot of engagement. Where does business engagement fit in that? And can we kind of use this opportunity to improve the business engagement. One thing we've learned on the River Road Santa Clara plan is we're getting a lot of feedback right now on how businesses are potentially impacted by the new codes being proposed. So some feedback that I received was, hey, can we better include the businesses in that community engagement piece? And then secondly, what are the potential tools for implementation? Another piece of feedback that I have been getting is that the plan feels like it doesn't have kind of teeth for almost enforcement. There's a lot of use of words like we encourage or we strive for. How do we make sure that the items in the plan actually can get implemented? So that's kind of part two of that question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Leach. Are there other councilors that would like to make?
I actually would love an opportunity for the
Oh.
staff to be able to respond to those questions, Councilor Groves.
Thank you. There is that part of this, I guess.
Thanks, Councilor. I'll first respond to the question about engaging the business community. We did note that in the strategic plan, supporting the business environment is one of the strategic goals, and we note that should be addressed in neighborhood planning. In our first stage of the planning process, we have stakeholder mapping, and that's when we're going to identify what is the best people, the best organization, and the best approach to engage with the business community, and then design an engagement plan with their participation. That we close our slides with planning with instead of planning for. So we definitely know that we need to do that kind of engagement. The how is still yet to be determined.
And I can jump in on implementation, and if I miss anything, feel free to jump in, Fabio. So the River Road Plan is actually a land use plan. It will be adopted, and some of the phrases you were talking about are in the policy language, and those are often visionary, phrases in a way, or sentences, statements. And so in this case, we're not anticipating that it's going to have policies in it. It will be, I think, more action oriented. And so it'll be about action. I'm going to make one up. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know what either of these neighborhoods need, but it could be that one neighborhood wants more street trees. And so it would be, figuring out what that implementation would be to get more street trees, in that neighborhood. It could be that they have enough zoned commercial land, but it's just not being developed. So is it talking with community development and figuring out, are there incentives that are available? Those are just some examples. It could also be, looking at the parks plan and prioritizing what of their projects in there, they are really think are most important to that neighborhood.
I want to add something about the implementation and the enforcement value of the plan. So we hope to identify through this process everything else that has already been addressed in other plans. For example, our land use plan or our park systems improvement or move huge and everything else that has been designed with community engagement. So we expect that many of the needs have already been expressed in those plans, and those have more enforcement power. In addition, if we identify something that is not yet covered in those plans, they become a recommendation. The resulting document is a document that is much easier for people to understand how the city is working to support whatever they need in the place where they live. So that community engagement and education will create some expectations and will make it easier for the community to demand as a response to what they need. If the plan is easier for people to understand, we can expect that more people will refer to that plan when they engage in conversations with their representatives and with city staff.
Great. And what happens when what comes out of the community engagement is a need for some types of land use adjustments in the code? Will that also arise, or do you foresee it arising, and how would we address it at that point?
Question. That's a great question. I don't think we've forecasted all the things that come out of this. It is possible that there could be something land use at the end that comes out of it. And I mean, I could foresee that happening. It's just that the entire focus of the plan is not about zoning and land use, but it could be that in a specific neighborhood that there is a tweak that's needed. But I think we'd also think, is this something we need citywide, or is this something specific to that neighborhood as well? And this gives us an opportunity to look at that.
Great. Thank you so much. No, I'm really excited about the possibility of this and having it be a little more targeted and action driven. So thank you for your presentation and for answering my questions.
Thank you, Counselor. I know we have Counselor Evans for a second round. Are there any other counselors for a first round?
Be quick.
Counselor Ye.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Counselor Zelenka's enthusiasm. I'm very impressed with this. There's a refinement plan that incorporates a couple areas up in the north, and I have been in situations where people disagree about what it's trying to say or what it's trying to do. I think you're right that probably people had goals that just didn't fit into land use, and they were trying to solve them all in this one place, but that wasn't the tool that they needed to use. So I'm also very enthusiastic about this, and I think if the pilot goes well, we could see it working great in other parts. I would love it to come up to my neighborhood when it's their turn. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Counselor Ye. Any other counselors? I'm going to take my first round and then Counselor Evans. Thank you for the presentation. I too am excited to see where this goes. I think anything we can do to streamline what has always been a cumbersome process and time-consuming process, I think is positive. Now, with that said, with all the good aspects of it, what are we missing? What are we going to lose?
Yeah, you want to start?
So I will start just saying that one of the actions we included for the first phase is researching what are other jurisdictions doing right now that the landscape has changed. So everything is new. So we may find out things that we cannot anticipate right now. And we are going to dedicate some staff time and capacity to understand what has changed, what is it that we can no longer provide through neighborhood planning, considering the change in the state law. So that's yet to be determined, and we'll make that clear as we start in this process.
Okay, thank you. Again, I think this is a good direction to go. It's going to be very important that we have a robust community discussion. I know that there's a lot of people in the neighborhoods that are interested in being involved in this, and they want to have their voices in the room. I also agree with Councilor Leach that it's important to include the businesses in each area as key stakeholders. So I think that's going to be interesting to watch, and I look forward to learning more. So at this, Councilor Semple, first round.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think this is a great idea. The neighborhood planning has been strenuous and controversial, and I've been wondering what we were going to do about the race between Bethel and University, and all the rest of the neighborhoods to follow. So I think this is a really positive way to do it. And as I had said with the South Willamette, I was hoping after that didn't work that the Santa Clara plan would give us a good template of how to do neighborhood planning. But with the changes that you've mentioned, that's really not the best model for how things have changed. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this evolves and any stumbling blocks to be worked through. But it's a great start. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Semple. Councilor Evans for a second round, followed by Councilor Zelenka. Second round.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm concerned about, and I appreciate the fact that you're looking to break down silos between departments on this and try to work, across departmental lines to make something really positive happen out of this. One of the things I would like to mention or underline is that Bethel has a unique situation in that we have our own school district. And one of my concerns is that we continue to do some of the work that we did previously when we were talking about the revitalization of Echo Hollow Pool and how smoothly that process went for us to be able to, do the improvements that were needed, expand the play area and other things in that footprint. I also want to point out that the Bethel School District has consistently passed bond measures, and we have improved our schools significantly over the last few years, including the new Cascade Middle School, the science extension to Willamette High School, and the rebuilding of Fairfield School. So I'm really interested to know how staff is planning to be inclusive of the school district and the stakeholders that are in the area, the parents, as well as the teachers and administrators for the Bethel School District.
In our comprehensive process slide, we did include the school district as a partner, because we do understand, especially in the Bethel case, that we need a stronger partnership with the school district, because many of the needs that residents have, they can be supported through school facilities, for example, space for sports and playgrounds for kids and other programs that the school district offer. So we will seek strong collaboration with the school district.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Evans. Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, thanks. I think this process is actually going to allow for more robust business and neighbor input into the process, in part because it's more focused and it's shorter and it's tailored to the problems, issues, needs of the particular neighborhood. So I think it's actually going to be a net positive. There was nothing constraining us to the input. Randy, your question about what do we lose? Good question. I often ask it myself. But in this case, we haven't done a refinement plan in 15, 20 years, and we're probably not going to do any. So a classic neighborhood refinement plan focused on land use. So I don't think we lose anything because nothing was going to happen. I think with a more focused, nimble process that with a cross-departmental project team will get us to tailored solutions that will work better. And whether they be land use, whether they be ordinance changes, whether they need programmatic or whatever the solution out of the toolkit that we pull out will be there. So I think I wanted to say we're going to get there faster, but the fact that we're not doing any, we're obviously going to get there faster. If this allows us to actually accomplish some of the things that neighborhoods want us to do, which is address these issues in a more focused and specific way, I think this is going to be a much better way to handle neighborhood planning. And those folks that think that the be end all of land use of neighborhood planning is land use, there's a lot more to it than that. A lot of the stuff that can be done is outside of that realm and should be, but we can still do land use if we need to. But I think that's hard to do, cumbersome, and has a lot of process around it. And if we can do it faster and get there in a different way, I think that's worth the shot.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Zelenka. Okay, looks like everybody has said their piece. I'm not seeing a motion for this tonight.
It's not a motion. This is the direction we're heading, and we're just looking for more feedback.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the presentation and answering our questions.
Thanks for being here at 5:30.
So let's move on to the next work session agenda item, which is a work session and possible action. Approval of the project list with $5 million for walking projects, $3 million for bike projects, $3 million for safety projects, and $2 million for street trees as part of the 2025 to 2029 street repair bond measure. City Manager, did you want to tee this off? Or?
that was actually a great intro. So I'm just going to kick it over to Reed, who's going to do, I think, just a short recap and where we are today.
Yep, I gotta fire up my computer here, but in support of neighborhood planning, and I know planning is in my title, but I really like plans. One of the things that came out of the River Road Santa Clara neighborhood planning process was the community's desire to eliminate the barrier that is the Beltline Highway and sort of unifying Santa Clara with River Road. And so we started to put resource behind identifying how to develop a bridge. And so we've cobbled together about half the funding to do that. And I would credit that planning process with bringing that to our attention because we thought that would be a nice idea. But it was a really expensive one. And the community said it's worth pursuing because it's really what we want. So I expect more of those things to happen as we go through the planning process. And we're going to have a whole list of projects for them to look at as part of the outcomes of the Move Huge. I'm up yet. So my name is Reed Dunbar, and I'm a senior transportation planner with the City of Eugene in transportation planning. And this is Rob Interfeld, who is the transportation planning manager. And I was here in September to talk about this project that we affectionately call Move Huge. And tonight I'm going to talk about the requirements for this project and all of that to get to a point where hopefully we adopt a project list tonight. Talk a little bit about the methodology and how we ranked those projects, and then get into the list as you would like. Council Resolution number 5364 itemize a couple different buckets for transportation that would occur as part of the street repair bond measure. That included $5 million for walking projects, $3 million for biking projects, $3 million for safety projects, $2 million for street tree projects, and then an unprogrammed amount of around $2 million used to leverage grant funding or to achieve economies of scale. Together tonight, we're going to talk about the $11 million of those discrete buckets, including walking, biking, and safety projects. To get us to that point where we could make a list, we used the resolution to get to as a guide so that we could develop criteria. So there were a few things that were important in the resolution. One was geographic distribution throughout the community, and that balanced with the projects selected to increase the equity of infrastructure across the city. Citizen input was also important. And so we developed a very robust project outline and process so that we could go talk to the public about what their needs were. The condition of existing facilities also matters because we don't have as much money to maintain the things as we do to build new stuff. And so part of this could potentially be used to maintain the stuff that we already have. Triple bottom line considerations, of course, and then the adopted plans that we have in place, like the Transportation System Plan, the Vision Zero Action Plan, and CAP 2.0. From a timeline perspective, as soon as the bond measure was passed in November, we started scoping what this project, what this process could look like. And so December was basically gone with holidays and everything, but January, February, we start scoping what the process would look like. We start identifying community members and whatever organizations they represent, if they have meetings that are upcoming that we can be a part of, identifying stakeholders internally within the city that we would want to touch base with, and then identifying stakeholders externally within the community that have a lot of thoughts about transportation. So we started putting all of that together and started the process in March with going out to the public, presenting them a series of maps, giving them some online options, and collecting all of their feedback at once. That takes us all the way up to about midsummer. So we're collecting information. We said, once we have all of that, we're going to have to figure out how to rank or prioritize the projects that they've given us so that we can winnow that down to a list that we can actually deliver with the amount of money that we have. So that takes us right up to September, which was our first work session where we presented the draft list. And the draft list is largely the same as when you saw it in September, with just one project has been changed. And so we can get into that. And then tonight, we're hoping that you will approve that draft project list. So the objectives of Move Huge specifically were to create a priority list of walking, biking, and safety projects. Again, have a very robust conversation with the community about their transportation choices as they see them. What's comfortable, what's not comfortable, what would encourage you to potentially try different transportation options, and what would make your trip better, essentially. And then we wanted to include equity and geographic distribution considerations so that we had a variety of different projects throughout the community. And that's our final result, is that list of projects that we think are ready to deliver. The outreach process, again, just briefly, we had a bunch of in-person events where there was a community organization that was already having an event. We invited ourselves to that event and talked to their folks specifically about their transportation choices and options. We had 2 open houses specific to this project. We mailed out a bunch of postcards, primarily to folks who don't generally come to the meetings as often. And so we wanted to say, hey, we're having a lot of opportunities for engagement. Will you please come to some of those? We developed an online map. So folks who couldn't come and see one of these cool table maps and sort of draw in what they'd like to see happen could leave a comment. We got 1,300 different responses on that wiki map. And then we also had an online survey component where we talked more about programmatic things, like what would incentivize you to try taking the bus more often for some trips. And all of that led to the development of the list. But as I mentioned in the background, we were trying to develop criteria that would help us go through the list and know which project we should focus on first. And so all of these criteria are objective, which means there's a number assigned to them, which means as we go through each of the different projects, we can assign a number to it and then basically come up with a list based on the value of each of those projects. So we looked at safety, which is a primary consideration always. How many crashes occurred along a corridor or at an intersection? What's the current speed limit? Because often the higher the speed limit, the more serious the injuries, those sorts of things. Travel demand was another major area that we looked at. Where are people trying to go? And what is preventing them from doing that the way that they want to? In other words, when we talked to the public, we said, well, how do you usually get to work? And they say, I drive. We said, that's okay. It's like, well, but I'd rather walk. Well, why don't you walk? What is getting in the way of that? And it can be as simple as an intersection and the timing doesn't seem right. I don't have enough walk time to get across the street. Or it could be there is no signal that helps me get across the street and I have to sort of fend for myself. And that's scary. And so I don't do that at all. I'd rather drive my car. And so we collected all of that travel demand sort of information too. How far are they from a bus stop? How far are they from a school or other public gathering place? And so we were able to use proximity data to help score the projects. And of course, equity. So where are our low income communities? Where are our BIPOC communities? And then we also looked at the age of our traveling public, the very old and the very young who are more reliant on active transportation, generally speaking, and where are their sticky points where they have trouble getting to those destinations. So we put all of that together and we had a really robust list of about 1,600 projects. And this is where staff sort of scrutinizes each of those projects individually and says, okay, we can build that, we can't build that. So constructability is a big part of that. Yes, we can do a bridge here. No, we can't. We don't have enough money to do this. We can probably do some of these types of projects. So constructability is part of that. Readiness is the community going to accept this project at this point? Some projects require quite a bit. And so we wanted to stick with projects that we thought would get a lot of community support. Also wanted to have a lot of diversity in the project types. So not just sidewalk infill. It shouldn't just be a sidewalk infill program, but that should be part of what we're offering. And we wanted the community to tell us if that's what we should be prioritizing. And in some neighborhoods, that is what they wanted. And in others, they wanted more bikeways, or they wanted more street lighting, or they wanted that one intersection to be fixed so that they felt more comfortable taking their kids across the street and going to get some ice cream or something like that. And then lastly, where we had a bunch of projects that were of about the same score, we looked at the value to the network. So if one project is going to link a neighborhood to like a commercial center, that is or proposes a lot of value to the network, and that is a priority project. It does double duty versus one that basically just connects the neighborhood together, which is also very important, but doesn't unlock the transportation options that collecting different types of land uses together does. So we developed a table that we talked about last time. This is basically what you looked at last time. We moved about $55,000 around for one project. And there was also sort of a rounding error that I think we fixed with some of the walking and biking, but this is basically what you looked at last time. And again, I just wanted to point out that Ward 8 is a little higher. There's a number of reasons for that. One is that it's a really big ward. It includes the West Eugene industrial area, but also the neighborhoods of Churchill and a big part of Bethel. And so when we sort of take those projects and sort of put them back into the buckets, we end up right where we want it to be, with a good mixture of projects that adhere to the guidance we got from City Council in terms of making sure we had projects in both PED, bike, and safety. And so we were able to manage to do that. One of the questions that came up during the work session last time was, well, but so then out of the entire bond, how much is going to my ward? And so this is what this table talks about, is we take all the pavement projects, we take all the bike ped projects, which is really part of the Move Huge. And then that last column of overall spending by ward kind of shows you what everybody's going to get for this bond measure. And I think it's important to recognize that in other bond measures, other wards scored a little bit better. And so it's hard to say that we're going to have perfect distribution of projects, because depending on where streets are in their repair cycle, things change, and it is often more affordable for us to deliver a bunch of projects in a single geography than it is to be all over the place. And so we do the best that we can with geographic distribution, but there are some benefits in focusing on certain areas. There's also a question about centerline miles related specifically to streets and to sidewalks, like how much existing street is out there to begin with, meaning potentially if I have more streets, I have more streets to maintain, and that could impact how much maintenance is required over time. And so that's what this table is showing too, is yeah, it's sort of all over the place. And so that's why we would expect our totals to also be sort of all over the place, because different neighborhoods contain different things and they need to be maintained. But some have more maintenance needs than others. Just a word about overhead street lighting, which also came up during the work session. And what does overhead street lighting include? Primarily, our standard is to put an overhead street light at all of the intersections of streets. And if there's a large block, we might actually get into some infill between the intersections as well. And what happens on some really large corridors like River Road is that those intersections are actually very far apart from each other. And so we do some infill to make sure that there's some lighting in there, but it might be unevenly spaced based on where those existing overhead lights are exist. And so the proposal would be to go back in and make sure that we have more even distribution in some of those super blocks. And so that overhead lighting is more even throughout the corridor. And we have an agreement in place with eWeb to use their poles, and that's indeed where most of our overhead lighting lives, is on those utility poles. And then any pedestrian crossing project that we are proposing, we also factored in overhead lighting for each of those pedestrian crossings. So if there isn't an overhead light, we add an overhead light. And if there is an overhead light, we analyze it, figure out if there's a high pressure sodium bulb or if it's an LED. And most of the time we try to upgrade them to LED. The corridors included for street lighting include River Road, North Ganneville Avenue, Bailey Hill Road, and the Roosevelt Shared Use Path, which doesn't have any lighting at all right now. Just a word on street trees. Street trees is also part of what you're being asked to approve tonight, or at least the methodology for how the Urban Forestry Department is going to assemble that list. They're going to have 2 tiers of projects. The first tier is about planting and establishment of street trees. The second tier is removal of stumps and hazard trees, preparation of soil, and alteration to potential planting sites. And that list will get developed annually and then brought to the Sustainability Commission for approval on an annual basis. The streets that they're considering for street trees will be analyzed based on geographic distribution, CAP 2.0, triple bottom line considerations, but they're also looking at data. And so we know what the average temperature is for various areas based on whether or not there's tree canopy. And if we're creating heat island effects, we've got a really good heat island map. That's what that's showing. Household income, vulnerable populations. There's some CDC health indices that are really helpful as well. So they're going to use a combination of those things to develop a list on an annual basis that will then go to the Sustainability Commission. So that's really all I have. Again, as a reminder, we are asking you to approve the list tonight. Hopefully, we've had an opportunity to talk to most of you if you wanted to talk to us, and made any clarifications that you require. But you know, I think this is a good place to be with $15 million to spend on street trees and walking and biking and safety projects. And if there's anything I learned from the River Road Santa Clara neighborhood planning process or the Move Huge process, it's that we have a lot of transportation need out there, and that folks would be doing more recreationally. They'd be walking their kids to school more often. They'd be potentially using the bus to get to work if they felt safe making that connection. And so eliminating barriers by providing better pedestrian crossings and making the existing bikeway network feel safer so that people feel comfortable riding with their children is really critical to a lot of our goals. And I think this is going to get us a long way toward meeting them. So this is a good place to be. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. In the queue so far, I have Councilor Zelenka, followed by Councilor Keating. Councilor Zelenka.
Thanks. Good presentation. I remember the first bond back in 2008, I put in a motion to have 5% of the bonds go to like bike ped transit oriented things. And that I thought that was pushing the envelope then. Then it got to 10%. Now we're at 15 million, or about 30%. I like the progression that we're getting, and I think it's about appropriate. I love that the walking, biking, safety, and tree projects are included in all of this on top of the payment projects. That's what we're trying to change here. I like that we're incorporating the CAP 2.0, the Vision Zero, TSP, and all the public involvement and input that we got. When Bonnie Bettman and I first put this 2008 bond, I think we created a winning formula to getting to yes, and it's gone up, I think, in percentage every year. It had 4 things in it. One was that there be a specific plan of projects that you couldn't change, that we did promises made, promises kept. So we did an audit of what we did and made sure we did it. If you didn't do it on those projects, you couldn't spend the money. And then lastly, that we spread the benefits equally around the city, and see that everybody had gains, or they got something, they got benefits from it. I'm concerned here that about the inequity of where the benefits are being realized in this project list. So bonds require a vote, a yes vote, maximizing the yeses and minimizing the nos. And rough equity and everybody getting benefit is a powerful motivating factor in getting people to vote yes. My fear is that migrating away from that powerful motivating factor to get to a yes vote will imperil future yes votes for road bonds. So some facts about the last vote. All but 2 precincts voted in favor of it, but not all wards precincts voted in the same proportions. Wards 1, 2, and 3 were 80% yes votes, and 5, 6, 7, and 8 were about 56, 57%. The highest yes votes came from wards 1, 2, and 3. The lowest votes, yes votes came from 4, 5, or 5, 6, and 7, and 8. So 9 out of the 11 highest votes on this were from wards 1, 2, and 3. That's over 80%. So when we start seeing large differences in benefits, we imperil those future yes votes on this bond. When wards 1, 2, and 3 have a third the benefits on this walking, bike, peds, other things from the highest ward and safety investments, we imperil future yes votes. When wards 1, 2, and 3 get less than 2/3 of the overall benefits of the highest ward, we imperil future yes votes. So word of caution about the next bond, be mindful of this geographic distribution. It was a powerful incentive for get people to vote yes. We don't want to imperil that yes vote. So while I don't like the way this was done and I disagree with it, I'm going to support the project vote, but I just a word of warning, if we go down this track, we're going to be in trouble in future.
Okay, Councilor Keating.
Thank you, Councilor Groves. I appreciate Councilor Zelenka's perspective. And I was thinking similarly about, I think we're on page 6, if we could call it up. If there's a way in the future we could show where certain precincts or certain wards of that back. No, forward. This might work. If we could show where certain wards turned out for this, that would be helpful. Because if community members are stepping up to say, yes, I'm willing to increase my property taxes to pay for this, then we should recognize that as part of our formula. Now, that being said, I'm looking at the voters pamphlet in 2022, when we passed this roads bond, we made it really clear that the Citizens Advisory Committee, composed of individuals from the Eugene community, will monitor how these funds are spent and indeed, if we are delivering on promises made, promises kept. So I look forward to seeing the Citizens Advisory Committee's report when it comes to the $11 million breakdown. But in the distribution, I hear you, Councilor Zelenka. My question revolves around my ward in particular, having one of the highest amount of projects for pedestrian and bike safety, but one of the fewest dollars spent. And I suspect that's because we're not in a largely industrial zone in Ward 2, where those streets are in need of repair, but it's more of a bike walk friendly area. Can we talk about, or can you give me some clarity about the nimble spending of those bike ped projects in Ward 2? Because there is, it's not lopsided, but I do recognize in Ward 2 in the South Hills, we have one of the highest number of projects, but one of the fewest dollars spent. Are we using our resources that much more wisely in Ward 2? Could you elaborate on that, please?
Take it or you want me to? Go ahead, you can start. Okay, thanks. One thing I would say is that Reed laid out kind of the criteria we used in the process we went through, and then there were projects that rose to the top. And so part of the whole process we went through was like, what are the projects that are going to move us forward as a community? And so like in some words, like the Roosevelt Path was a big project that we actually at staff level, as we were kind of going through and creating this list based on the community input and the quantitative analysis we did, the Roosevelt Path really rose to the top, both for lighting and rehabilitation. And we wanted to put a lot more to that project. We didn't fully fund it because we needed to distribute more across different wards, but we feel like that's one of the major regional paths in Eugene that we've neglected over time. And we haven't really, since we've been with the city, we haven't put any improvements into that path, which is one of our regional paths. Whereas from previous bonds, we've invested in rehabilitating. We had a huge project in an earlier bond on the Amazon path, which is really the spine of the active transportation network in South Eugene. And then with grant funding, we extended that path all the way to the Ridgeline Trail along the East Amazon Bikeway with a diagonal bike signal. And so, I think part of it is sort of looking across the wards at where the need is, where not just where we made other investments, because it's not about like that had other, we're not trying to make the case that we have these other grants and so those wards shouldn't get as much money, but it's more like we've already built out a lot of that active transportation infrastructure in South Eugene with these other investments that we've made. And so like we did that, bikeway along East Amazon. We're going to be actually extending the path using other funds through Tugman Park this summer to extend the Amazon path all the way up to 39th at the top of Tugman Park. So part of it is just like where are the opportunities to really move the dial in different neighborhoods, and then how does it all balance out? I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's more funding sources than just the bond measure.
Mhm.
And we try very hard to make sure that when we go after a grant opportunity, that we are looking at every part of the city and evaluating each of those basically equally. So sometimes a project in one area is going to score better based on the type of grant that's available than a grant in another ward, and vice versa. So we do the best that we can in making sure that we're distributing money of all colors across the city. And as Rob mentioned, we have been investing in a variety of neighborhoods using different funding sources for a while. And it's important to recognize that not everybody's starting at the same place. There are neighborhoods that still don't have protected bike lanes at all. Yours does. And so when folks are asking about safer journey to work or to school on bicycles, they're asking for the type of infrastructure that doesn't exist in their ward yet. And so those are the sorts of considerations that we really look at. And then with those objective criteria, we were really saying, okay, well, let's not have any favorites at all. Let's just let the numbers tell us what's going on. And so that's what really created that list. And so when we started going down the list, we're like, oh, these projects are scoring really well. Seems to be a lot of demand for this type of facility. And sometimes the facility that folks wanted is a more expensive type of facility. And that also matters. It costs more money to develop a shared use path than it does a sidewalk infill project, for example. And so those are the sorts of things that tend to happen. And we wanted to make sure we were doing projects everywhere and that everybody was getting investment. But it's hard to do it in a one-for-one because not everybody's starting at the same place.
I appreciate that. In our ward, we do have one of the highest aging population, pretty clearly. Moreover, you said we have a lot of protected bike lanes. I would point to Fox Hollow, and I would point to the route that I took here on my e-bike tonight on Hilliard. Incredibly dangerous and white-knuckled. So the flip side is I recognize that I will roll through 4 wards today. And so our community members often will travel throughout this municipality. And so I recognize the value in investments across the board as I will go from wards 2, 3, 1, and then 7 for dinner tonight. So I'll need a second round because I have a lot more questions about tree canopy or expansion and preservation.
Thank you, Councilor Keating. I now have Councilor Ye, followed by Councilor Leach.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, again, as with the other meeting, I'd like to thank you guys for doing such a good job on this process. I've continued to be impressed by the work that you've done to get us to this point. I wanted to make it pretty clear that I think it's inappropriate to base resource allocation decisions on voting rates. Who votes and who doesn't is a complicated issue. And as a neighborhood leader and as a city councilor in North Eugene, I constantly speak with folks about their perception that the city cares more about South Eugene than they do about North Eugene. And that's why they don't engage. And sometimes that means they're also not voting. It's not because they don't care. It's not because they aren't willing to put their money towards things that matter to them, but they're making a decision based on other factors. There's also a clear factor on age and race and other demographics that make people vote or not vote. So basing any decisions purely on voting rates, just to me, is completely inappropriate. And I just wanted to make sure that was clear to staff that I would not want that to be a part of this process that you are using to make decisions.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Ye. Or did you want a response on that, or you just?
It's more information sharing.
Right. Okay, Councilor Ye or Councilor Leach, followed by Councilor Semple, first round.
Thank you. I want to echo the sentiments that this process is incredible. I am also highly impressed with the way that it has been done. So congratulations. I also think that when you look at the map and the projects, it is very geographically distributed across our city. We don't live our daily lives based on our ward lines. I used to live over off of Barger, and I would frequently take my bicycle from the Golden Gardens pathway to the bike lane on Terry into the Prairie Meadows system over to West 11th onto the Fern Ridge path system. And from there, it gets complicated. And I'm really pleased to see that there's investments being made in that transportation system so that we can connect people from all sides of our city. And that Grant Street connector, if you've never ridden a bicycle on Garfield, you'll know it's very, very dangerous, very difficult to do. And if I had to do that every day, I would likely not choose to ride my bike in that area. So I'm just highly impressed. I am really excited to vote these projects forward. I think that as people start to see some of these improvements, we'll see a lot of benefits and a lot of morale in our community. And so, yeah, I encourage us to not think of this as ward specific and to think of this as a benefit to everyone that's involved in using these systems. And that equity approach that you've taken is, I think, really perfect. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Leach. Councilor Semple.
Thank you. Thank you for this work and bringing it back to us. I've been very pleased. The areas of Ward 1 that I've had complaining about have been addressed. And I want to echo Jennifer and Lindsay and Matt in that we're a community, we're a city, and none of us stay only in our own wards. So it's not a fight against who gets more money or more projects. Let's look at it as a whole. And the more people we get on bikes because it's safer or there's more paths, the better the whole community is. So I'm cautious about dividing things up by ward and sort of a separate question because I don't want it to be in parallel with who gets bike paths. But do we have data for how much property tax comes in from each ward? Because we're talking about how many people vote. How much money does we get from each ward? I bet it's not all the same. And I don't think that it should be proportioned by that. But I think it would be interesting to have that data just to show we're not all the same. So go community, go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Semple. And I've got Councilor Zelenka and Councilor Keating for second rounds, but I'm going to put myself in the queue and echo my voice to say thank you for the work that you did on this. There are a number of metrics we can apply to this process, including centerline miles, lane miles, which we never heard, but I know that number's available out there somewhere, as well as sidewalk miles. And I would also encourage my colleagues to not just look at the $15 million of this part of the bond, but to look at the other $45 million and what the distribution levels are there as well. And Councilor Zelenka, I don't want to get into ward by ward, but just to put things in perspective, Ward 3 has the least amount of centerline miles. And at the same time, for the road preservation project list, Ward 3 is getting over $5 million. I think that's probably appropriate. There's old streets in there. Ward 8, which has not quite double the amount of centerline miles, is getting just under $4 million. So, you know, is that fair? Well, I'm putting my trust in staff in the engineering department to evaluate the roads and tell us what needs to be done. I mean, I look at some of the roads in my ward, but, you know, I'll channel Kurt Corey from the past, the previous or long time ago public works director, used to always say the roads that they repair don't always look to the public like the roads that need repair. And that's because when roads degrade to a certain level, they require a complete rebuild. And it's really not going to change the need to do that if you repair them now or a year from now. At the same time, if Public Works steps in and repairs a road that's starting to alligator or some of these other features that degrade the road surface that allow the road bed then to be degraded, it's more cost effective to save a road that's savable rather than to dive full in on a road that's going to need to be fully rebuilt anyway. So I'm certainly not qualified to make those assessments. I mean, I know what feels rough when I drive or bike over them, but at the same time, I think we have to put our trust in the experts that spent years in school to become engineers. Thank you. So Councilor Zelenka, round two. Correct. Hey, can you hold up just a second? Councilor Clark just put up his hand for round one.
Sorry, Alan, I apologize, but I didn't mean to sneak in front there. I should have gone beforehand. Can either of you tell me what the amount of deferred maintenance is today?
I guess the answer for Reed and I would be no, but do you mean out of our roadway system?
Yeah.
I think that would be, maybe Jennifer would know the answer to that. Our city engineer.
Jennifer Willer, city engineer. And unfortunately, I don't have that number right off the top of my head. I do have an annual report that I could put my fingers on, you know, as soon as I leave here, that I could get that information to you very easily.
Thank you. The reason, and I'd love to know that if you could, by virtue of the email, the reason we started the road bond in the first place was that deferred maintenance had gotten to a really ugly and difficult place where our road system had deteriorated badly. And we didn't have a lot of other choices about how to deal with it for the long-term problem than to consider a bond. I think it was conceived and executed wisely for the first couple of times, and that's why it's worked well. I think our roads are in better shape than they were before. I'm really concerned with the idea that we have so many we have such a high percentage of spending on alternative means of transportation because it wasn't the reason we started the road bond in the first place. It was to fix the problem of roads not well taken care of. And we don't even know the deferred maintenance that we don't know it off the top of our head. I can remember, I think it used to be 78,000 when 78 million when Kurt Curry first brought it up. Maybe Alan can correct me in that number. But I think there are an awful lot of people that, as Alan has said before, who want us to focus on other means of transportation that we spend this much of the bond on. But I'm concerned that we're getting to too high a percentage when it wasn't the point in the first place. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Clark. Jennifer, did you want to respond to that?
I'm not sure that there was another question in there that a response from me. Okay, thank you.
Well, just quickly, I was the fire chief at the time that first bond came into play, and I believe the number was around 200 million that we had.
Yeah, I could be wrong.
And we've worked it down to about 100 million. With time value money, that price keeps escalating. Second round, Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, it was over 200 million. Let me be clear about the point I was trying to make. It's about the politics of getting a yes vote. And the point is, people vote their self-interests. So don't screw with a formula that works. The bike ped safety projects in one ward is 3 times that in wards 1, 2, and 3. That puts future yes votes in peril. It's fine to score the projects and add in other factors. I think that's totally appropriate. But in the end, the politics of a yes vote demands that balancing towards an equitable sharing of benefits across the city more than staff has done here. And if we want to continue our run of successful bond votes, we need to keep that in mind.
Okay, Councilor Keating.
Thank you, Councilor Groves. While Councilor Zelenka is not wrong, the voters pamphlet that asked for a yes vote in 2022 indicated that the last bond funded 230 miles in the city. It did not say ward by ward where those road miles were repaired. We live in a community, we live in a city where we bike, ped, and drive throughout our community. And what's good for our neighbors in one ward is good for us as we travel to and from our grocery stores, our workplaces, our theaters, et cetera. And so I'm less concerned about the territoriality conversation and more concerned about the distribution of the $11 million between walking, biking, safety, and street tree projects. We led with indicating how important it is for tree preservation and increasing our canopy our canopy coverage, and yet the street tree projects are coming in at 2 million versus 3 million respectively for biking and safety each, and 5 million for walking, with a 2 million for unprogrammed. I recognize there's going to be an independent auditor, as promised in the voters pamphlet, to oversee this, and the aforementioned Citizens Advisory Committee. Is there any wiggle room, city manager or Rob or Reed, for bolstering and boosting the investment for the street tree projects from a 2 million to say a 2.5 or a 1 or a 3 million, and taking that unprogrammed grant funding piece and maybe toggling that down to a 1.5? Like, are those unprogrammed pieces completely allocated? And are we really leading with our values when we're saying that we have this pool of resources and we're going to take the Sustainability Commission's recommendations, but we're going to give the tree canopy coverage as outlined on page 16, if we can see it, called up on the slide, please, where we're going to give the street tree projects the lowest allocation that are being proposed in Council Resolution 5364. Moreover, a follow-up question would be the color coding here. Maybe I'm colorblind, but I'm not seeing a difference between blue and gray. I see a lot of that kind of grayish blue in wards 8, 1, and 2 as priority coverage areas for increasing canopy coverage. Am I interpreting that map correctly?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, Councilor Cleany, I apologize because we did not arrange for there to be urban forestry staff here tonight, and we should have done that. So I apologize for that, because I think they would have been able to answer your question about that map. I mean, I think that map may be somewhat illustrative in that regard, but it looks like maybe, did you want to address?
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Keating. I just wanted to speak a little bit to the distribution by bucket. So when we were here in June of 2022 is when we were talking about the bond list, and we were talking to you all about the distribution, how much should be where. Those buckets are not only in the resolution, they were in the bond language. So we can't reduce one to make more money in another, right? So those are part of the bond. That's part of what we need to execute. Doesn't need to be right on the dollar, but it needs to be pretty close. You know, the 2 million, I will say, and I know when you look at those buckets, that I guess is tied for the smallest one with unfunded or the unprogrammed need. When we talked to our urban forestry staff, they were incredibly excited about that amount and gearing up to be able to actually put that much of an investment in the community. It's not to say that with time we couldn't probably put more in, but it's a significant amount of investment in urban forestry. The other piece is that, and I forget the number, but the state of Oregon has got a sizable amount of funding for urban forestry that's come in under the IRA from the federal government. And we've been working with the state urban forestry, Scott Altnoff, who used to work for the city and be an urban forester for us, to look at partnering and how we can bring a substantial amount of money through the IRA into Eugene for urban forestry as well. And that's work that's ongoing right now. Lastly, on unprogrammed, it's not to say that some of that couldn't be used for urban forestry. It's just different than the direction that was put in the bond language about trying to make sure that we were leveraging opportunities. It could be that could be used for a grant match on an urban forestry grant as well, that we really are looking for where can that have the most impact with the opportunities that come to us right in that moment. So that was the thought about that.
If I could just add one more thing. So sometimes we'll also include street trees as part of pure transportation projects. So the South Willamette Street project there were no street trees before along South Willamette that I can recall. And so we planted street trees as part of that. So there may be opportunities as part of some of these projects to incorporate street trees on the transportation side too. We certainly look for those opportunities more broadly on the transportation projects that we work on.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. One last thing. I'm sorry we couldn't give the number to you in the moment, but at least when we presented last year on the bond, the backlog was 87.6 million, and it'll be a little different right now. And again, we were close up to 180, 190 when we began this work, and I think even back then we could provide that information back to you. If we hadn't had bonds, we were able to project where we would be, which is not, hundreds of millions of dollars. It's made an incredible impact on the system and reducing that burden of backlog repairs.
Okay, I guess I'm just going to follow up real quick in my own round too. I just want to confirm on this heat map, is where the blue color is that where we don't have a problem? Because, that's up in the forested area. So I'm assuming that the canopy is keeping that area cool. And so the hot area is where we're seeing what looks to me kind of a reddish tone. I get accused of having color deficiency all the time, but you probably tell the way I dress. But that's I just want to make sure I'm seeing the map and reading it correctly.
Yeah. Clarification, Counselor. The priority areas, that second bullet point, that
Yes.
gray. It looks to me like those priority areas for increasing canopy coverage are areas where it is more heavily wooded and forested.
No, that is just a coincidence. The color of the bullet does not correspond to the map.
Okay.
The map is just an illustrative of the work we've done to understand the heat islands in Eugene. We can get this at a much more granular level. That is just the bullet point color. That is not the map color.
Got it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, if there are no more questions or comments, I believe Council Vice President has a motion.
I do. Thank you. Move to approve the document titled Proposed Walking, Biking, and Safety Project List, all wards, that is included in Attachment A to this AIS, and the document titled Street Tree Projects Process for Prioritizing Transportation Bond Funds, set forth in Attachment B in this AIS.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Opposed? It looks like it passes 7-1. Is there anything else to come before council this evening? Right now. Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned.